The Eucharistic miracle of Saint Germaine Cousin, who only lived 22 years, happened in Piblac, France in 1589, when Saint Germaine was 10 years old. From the time that our young shepherd girl became motherless, her father remarried a woman who from the very start demonstrated hostility towards her because Germaine's face was full of acne and not easy to look at. The stepmother, who could not stand the sight of Germaine's face, convinced her husband to make Germaine live in the small basement under the steps. The poor girl found herself so completely isolated in that basement that the rats were often her only companions. Germaine, however, was very close and devoted to our Lord, and in particular, loved the Blessed Sacrament and stayed and visited on a daily basis. Every day she would leave her sheep unattended to receive the Holy Eucharist, and miraculously the herd would never be attacked by wolves. To reach the church, however, Germaine had to cross the stream called Corbeil. One day the heavy rains had rendered the stream impossible to pass through, but the young girl decided to confront the furious waters of the stream and get through so that she could receive communion. Before going into the water in order to get across, she made the sign of the cross, and while she was reciting her prayers, she saw the waters miraculously separate in two, so that she could cross undisturbed. This also happened on the way back. I'd like to suggest another video in our series of a similar nature concerning waters that parted for safe passage. It was the 5th video we made about a flood in Avignon, France, where the town was flooded by raging river waters, and the church interior was flooded up to the tops of the pews, but not the aisle to the altar, which was dry, so that the friars could rescue the monstrance, which was exposed for perpetual adoration. That one at the church and this at the stream remind me of the parting waters of the Red Sea, when Moses was fleeing the Egyptians. The remains of the Egyptian chariots are still there on the floor of the Red Sea. To quote Exodus chapter 14, verses 21 through 38, "Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind, and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided. And the Israelites passed through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He jammed the wheels of their chariots so that they had difficulty driving. And the Egyptians said, 'Let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord's fighting for them against Egypt.' Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen.' Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back to its place. The Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and horsemen. The entire army of Pharaohs had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived."